Councillor Sardul Marwa, WPTU, Chairman of the Race Relations and Equal Opportunities Committee, Birmingham City Council.
वाहिगुरु जी का खालसा वाहिगुरु जी की फतेह सिख चैनल के प्यारे दर्शकों सिख चैनल वालों आप जी का बहुत बहुत स्वागत है सरदूल सिंह मरवा वालों आप जी नूं जी आया Sikhs and Politics, a political show which we launched and talking about the current issues, what's happening here in UK. And as you know, we covered a number of things. Today, I'm very pleased to say I'm joined by Lord Hunt of King's Heath, who has been in the National Health Service, one way or the other, Minister of and spokesman and chair of NHS Trusts, number of other things he's been involved with. Especially, I'm sure, if I can call on anybody to be expert on one topic, National Health Service, that is Lord Hunt. And let's welcome him. Lord Hunt, thank you very much for coming. Welcome to the Sikh Channel. And we have launched this program, Sikhs and Politics, a political show where we will be discussing the issues of the day and what's actually happening around us. Since you have most of your political life, I think, in National Health Service, and you are now chairing Heart of England Foundation Trust in Birmingham, or Solihull, around, and which covers a Good Hope Hospital, and maybe something else you can tell us. So if you want to just start off with your area of expertise, and you're now a chair of NHS. When did you become chair of the Heartlands Hospital?
Well, good evening. It's great to be here, and I became chair of Heart of England NHS Foundation Trust in 2011. So I've been chairman for 3 years now.
Right.
And it's a huge trust. We serve 1 million patients.
Right.
We run 3 hospitals, Solihull, Heartlands, and Good Hope and Sutton Coldfield.
Yeah.
We also run the chest clinic in town. We spend £600 million a year.
That's a big.
We have 11,000 staff.
Right.
And the staff do a fantastic job treating patients.
Right, right. Philip, if I may call you Philip, as I said in my introduction, you have devoted most of your political life in the National Health Service. You've been a minister in the last government. And if I may start, successive governments have always said, whoever came, they start to blame each other and try to fix National Health Service. And something is wrong, or maybe not wrong. And who is right? And if the Conservatives come in, they say, Labour haven't done this. The waiting lists are so long. If we just currently look at the accident and emergency service, 4 hours of waiting time, and they missed their targets, right? What is actually going on?
Well, let me start by saying the National Health Service is something special to us.
Absolutely.
In the UK. I mean, no other health system is like it. That we, all of us, are entitled to free healthcare.
Yeah.
And comprehensive healthcare. And so we all rely on the National Health Service. Most of us support it. But inevitably, it has its pressures as well. And if I can go back, I'm going to come on to accident and emergency department.
Yes,
because
okay.
It's a very important question.
Yep.
If you go back to 1997, the new Labour government came into power. And we were faced with an NHS that had been starved of investment. And we turned that round. We increased the amount of money going into the NHS by 1/3. And as a result, we were able to employ more people. We built new hospitals, 100 new hospitals, and waiting times came down dramatically. You know, in 97, people had to wait as long as 18 months
yes,
for an operation. We brought that down to 18 weeks. And the public noticed the difference. There's been an opinion poll called the British Attitude Survey, where they've asked the same question about the health service since 1983. Do you think it's doing a good job?
Yeah.
And you know, in 1997, only 38% of people thought it was doing a good job.
Low as that?
As low as that. In 2010, it was 70%. So people had noticed a big difference.
Yeah.
Okay, so there was a change of government. And you asked about politics. You know, why do political parties talk about the National Health Service all the time? Reason is, it's important to us. Every one of us uses the NHS. And so it's right that politicians like myself, whatever party we come from, spend a lot of time thinking about the NHS, how it can be improved. And I think what's happened since 2010 is we've had big financial cutbacks in the public sector. And that has had an impact on the health service as well. And so if you take accident and emergency departments, what's been happening is more people have come through.
Well, can I just stop you before you go there? But this coalition government now, the cutbacks are enormous. Not only in NHS and other departments. So that obviously going to have an impact on the National Health Service and ultimately impact on the patients who are waiting either for operations or going into the A&E or whatever. But if the Labour government put the investments in, now this government's not investing, although they're saying they're investing, but there are redundancies, lack of training, all sorts of things. Would you think that was the impact on because of the A&E?
Because accident and emergency departments are, if you like, they reflect what's happening in the health service as a whole. So, for instance, if it's difficult to get primary care treatment, you know, to see your general practitioner, you go to A&E because 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you'll be seen. We've seen cutbacks in primary care. If you are an old person, we've got a lot of older people in our society, vulnerable people. If they're brought into accident and emergency departments and they're admitted, often they stay in hospital a long time because we've lost a lot of the community support that would enable them to be discharged quickly back into their own home or into some other care facility. So beds in hospitals get people there who shouldn't be there, but they can't be discharged. And so you come into A&E and you can't then be moved into a hospital bed because we can't discharge people enough. So the A&E problem is a symptom of a general problem in the National Health Service. And you know, we know that in this country, as in many countries, that we have a growing older population. We have more and more people who are in their 70s and 80s. People are living longer, which is great. But when they become ill, they're often very frail. And the reason that the health service is struggling is because experts reckon just to keep pace with the growing number of older people, you need to increase your budget by about 4 to 5% in real terms every year. And what we're getting is a 0.25% real terms growth. So the money's got much tighter. And you're right, you know, nurse numbers have gone down. And as a result, the system is really struggling.
Well, when you get the questions on Wednesday to Prime Minister Questions Time, and you know, you hear this, so many doctors are coming, so many nurses are coming, and the figures are either plucked out of the air or they are real figures. Then the opposition obviously comes in and says, oh, that is not the real figures. And where the NHS is free of delivery, as you rightly said, we have those problems. Investment is needed in other departments, surely. But because everybody, sooner, later, or younger, older, are going to get ill, and they've got to be treated. And if the investment isn't there, those people are not going to get treated.
They're either not going to get treated, or they're going to have to wait a long time for treatment. And I don't want to go back to the bad old days.
No.
When you had long waiting lists. You know, I was very proud of the fact that we got waiting times down to 4 hours in A&E, and 18 weeks if you need an operation, and getting it in good quality facilities because of the new hospitals that we have built. But there is a risk. If we don't invest in our health service, things will get worse. Waiting times will get longer. And then people start to lose confidence in the health service. And, you know, there's no doubt about it that as society has more of an ageing population, you know, older people do make more demands on the health service.
Absolutely.
And often it's not just one illness, it's a number of illnesses altogether. And if I go through my hospitals and I talk to patients, you can see that many of them are very, very frail. And they can't just be discharged. You know, they can't come in for a day or 2 days.
No.
They have to be helped to get back on their feet, helped to feed themselves again. And this takes time, it takes resource.
Yeah, but then again, there's another problem. The elderly, some of them live by themselves, right? I mean, sometimes we, as Asian Sikhs, say these things. We are somewhat lucky, but that may be diminishing slowly, that the parents, the elderly, are looked after by their families. And where the indigenous population, some of them are living by themselves, if they're not in hospital, if they are discharged, then nobody's to look after them. That's another problem.
Right. If you talk about the indigenous population, when I was born in 1949, and my grandmother came to live with us when she was about 60 or 70. Mm-hmm. And that was the norm.
Yes.
You know, we had larger families. But life's changed.
Yeah, absolutely.
And people don't do that anymore.
No.
And so we have, and also, of course, with the divorce rate, you have many more single people.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid us men, we tend to die earlier, don't we?
Well,
so often, many women in particular
by themselves.
Are by themselves. And so if say, let's say an older person's had a fall, and she's brought into hospital, she's helped to get better, but you can't just send her back.
No.
Unless you're confident that if she goes back into her home, she's not going to fall over again. And the trouble is that, you know, hospitals are not great environments for people.
No, absolutely not.
And people who stay in there a long time, they sometimes lose the ability to look after themselves.
Right.
I hate it. You know, the awful thing is when someone's been looking after themselves in their own home, but something's happened, they've come into hospital, and then they can't go back to their own home.
No.
And they have to go to a nursing home.
Yeah.
And that's sad, you know, because our job should be to help people live as independent a life as possible.
Yeah, that's a sad state of affairs. If I can just move on, Philip, sorry. The same thing, or is it not, the Stafford or Mid Staffordshire Hospital, which has been in the news for a very long time now. And the Secretary of State, Jeremy Hunt, has now dissolved the NHS Trust from there. And what actually was wrong, where did it all fail? But if it did fail very quickly, and nobody stepped in. And when they did step in, that was a bit too late.
Well, this is the Mid Staffordshire NHS Trust, which is based in Stafford, a town not far from Birmingham. And it had some real problems in the way it was treating patients. The people felt that the staff were not as caring as they could be. And a review of their mortality rate suggested that the death rate of patients in that hospital was higher than it ought to be. And because there was such a lot of concern, my current boss, Andy Burnham, when he was Secretary of State, he ordered an inquiry. This current government turned it into a public inquiry, and they asked a QC, a senior lawyer, Mr. Francis, to come and look at it. And he issued 2 reports. What he basically said is that the people running the hospital, particularly the board of the hospital, were too focused on the finances of the hospital and on seeking foundation trust status. And they lost sight of the fact that their first responsibility was the quality of care. That, I think, has been a wake-up call for all of us. And I know in my board at Heart of England, we have our money problems. We worry about staffing numbers. But at the end of the day, I think what Francis has taught us is that whatever problem you have, if your number one focus isn't on the quality of patient care, then you're going to have problems.
Well, then, now, if the NHS trust is dissolved and the patients from that hospital are going into neighbouring, maybe Cannock, Wolverhampton, Birmingham maybe, or all over, wouldn't that have an impact on the patients who are going to travel 40, 30 miles?
I think it's very sad for the people of Stafford and the surrounding area that this has happened. I would have hoped that the government would have done more to actually enable the Staffordshire Hospital to keep most of its services. But that's not what's happened. It's losing a lot of its services. And some of the services actually have to go to Stoke-on-Trent. Some will go, as you said, to Cannock and to Wolverhampton. Some services will still be provided locally, but certainly not in the way they were in the past. And that is a pity. And I think the people in Stafford have deserved better than that.
Yeah, well, it's a vast building. What would happen to that? Then obviously then you'll have that building lying empty and the resources obviously gone haywire. And the people of Stafford, and they will not in the long run have a local hospital.
I think they'll have a local hospital, but it just won't. It won't be what we call a district general hospital. It won't be the normal acute hospital that has an accident and emergency department. Babies are born there. It provides surgery services. It's going to have less than it did in the past. Hopefully they'll find a room, you know, they'll use the hospital for other things, perhaps rehabilitation. For instance, say a patient has to go to Stoke to be treated. Maybe they can come back to Stafford after they've had, say, an operation and to recuperate there. So you can use it for those purposes. But I still think that the government could have done more to have protected those services in Stafford. After all, the people of Stafford should not be penalised because the board of that organisation didn't do a proper job. That seems to me to be unfair.
Absolutely. This government also tried a number of other things. GPs' own budgets, things like that. And that really hasn't taken off, which they thought it probably would do. And what's actually, do you think, gone wrong there? Was that the right thing to do? Give the money to the local GPs who are under a lot of pressure anyway?
Well, one thing I've learned as a health minister is that you can dabble with the structure. But often it has no impact or a negative impact on what's happening where patients get treated. And this is a good example of this. In the election, Mr. Cameron, the leader of the Conservative Party, now Prime Minister, said that they weren't going to reorganise the health service. But when they got into power, their Secretary of State for Health, then Andrew Lansley, it's the first thing he did. And he totally, you know, disrupted the service. And 2 years have been spent putting the new changes in. The heart of it is that general practitioners should be given a budget and collectively, in areas, decide where the money should be spent. Now, I think GPs are very good people, and I've got no problem in them being involved in these decisions. But what I do object to is that so much time and money, £3 billion has been spent on this change, none of which is impacting on the quality of patient care.
Well, that's,
you know, £3 billion
there's a lot of money.
Could have been spent shoring up Stafford Hospital. Or giving me more nurses. What a waste of money.
Well, the reason I'm saying that is it's at the moment, or in the very near past, has been that a patient have to wait a week to get an appointment with the GP. And if GP is burdened with this kind of other work he has to do, then the patient will have to wait longer to get an appointment.
I think, yeah, I've no problem in GPs having a say in how we're going to plan services, because clearly, you know, every day they see patients, they know some of the problems. But it sometimes is very difficult for patients to get access to a GP. Do you know, only a few days ago, the Royal College of General Practitioners issued a report, and they said that 10% of patients were finding it difficult to find a GP. 340 million appointments are made each year with a GP. And 34 million appointments, or people tried to make appointments 34 million times and they couldn't. This is a big problem. Life's changed, hasn't it? You know,
yeah.
Nowadays we live in this 24/7 world.
Yeah.
You broadcast 24. You know.
Yep, you do.
24/7. I work all hours really.
Yeah.
Many people do. Hospitals are expected to be fully staffed throughout the week.
Yeah.
And I don't think having primary care GPs not accessible for a lot of the time is acceptable anymore, and they have to change.
Well, if you can move on from there, there's a number of issues. You started with the Foundation Trust, which you are chairman of. That a lot of people just simply want to know, I'm going to the hospital. Whether it's a foundation trust, whether it's a normal NHS trust, or whatever the other name you can give it to them. And if I'm ill, I want to go to the nearest hospital. I think it's a bit of a dilemma for ordinary people. If you can, I mean, sure you can, the only person can explain what is a foundation trust, what is a normal trust, how one becomes, any other hospital wants to become a foundation trust. If you can just explain, Philip, I'd be grateful.
Okay, to the public, none of this matters. The only thing that matters is, can I get treatment?
Yeah.
Can I see a doctor?
Yeah.
Is the treatment going to be good? I understand that. But of course, behind the scenes, it's important that these hospitals and these GP services are run well. And that's what a foundation trust is all about. In the health service, since we created it in 1948, the hospitals have always been responsible direct to the politician in London who heads the health service.
Well, can I just interrupt you? I remember with one of your friends, John Charlton and Clive, and I used to be sitting on the Birmingham Health Authority.
Yes.
That's all it was.
Yep.
Then it was sort of dismantled into 4 or 5, North Birmingham, South Birmingham, all that. Then it became into trusts. Then now the foundation. So the reorganisation of the National Health Trust has taken a toll.
We've done too many reorganisations. Too many reorganisations.
You think is it if it works, change it. If it doesn't work, change it. That kind of.
When you know, I hope the Labour Party comes back to government next year.
Right.
And the one lesson that we have learned is you can make changes, but don't put the health service through yet another restructure.
Yeah, right.
We learnt that lesson. Foundation trusts.
Sorry to interrupt you.
They're important because traditionally the health service has been run from London, very centralised. The Secretary of State for Health telling every hospital what to do. And that's not really the best way to run it. So foundation trusts are given much more freedom to run their services. And the unique feature of them is they have members, local members of the community, patients, who become members of the trust. And in Heart of England, we have 100,000 members.
Right.
All mainly staff or patients or former patients. And the importance is, I was appointed by a governing body elected by the members.
I
so
see.
I'm not accountable to the Secretary of State.
So Secretary of State
No,
didn't appoint you?
he can't tell me what to do.
Okay.
But I am accountable to a body of governors who were elected by the members.
Right.
So every 2 months, I have to stand before them and explain what's been happening in our hospitals.
Right.
They can ask me questions, they can criticise me, they appointed me, and they can fire me as well.
Right.
So it's a more democratic system. It gives us more freedom to do the things we want to do, but it means I am accountable to local people rather than to a politician.
So is it a area which is covered by the foundation,
Yes.
who become members and elect the board and then obviously appoint a person like you?
So if you take my foundation trust, Heart of England, we cover the east of Birmingham,
Right.
the north of Birmingham, Sutton Coldfield, South Staffordshire, Solihull,
Yeah.
and South Warwickshire. So
Okay.
we have a huge catchment area,
Right.
and those 100,000 members come from all the way from South Staffordshire through to South Warwickshire.
Right. So how does the funding is then attracted, obviously by the government, to you? Since you're not accountable to the Secretary of State.
No, so the money doesn't come from the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State gives the money to commissioning bodies.
Okay.
And these are called clinical commissioning groups.
Right.
And they're made up of local general practitioners. And they then fund our hospitals
Okay.
to provide services. And we get funding from a lot of clinical commissioning groups.
Right.
Mainly, we call, in Birmingham, it's called Cross City.
Mm-hmm.
In Solihull, there's a Solihull Clinical Commissioning Group, and there's one in South Staffordshire. And they decide how much money we're going to get, what services they want. And every year we have a discussion about that.
Right.
We're in the middle of a very difficult discussion about the next financial year, which starts in April. But that's where we get our money from.
Okay, then the normal NHS trust, which is not a foundation trust, and they are accountable to the Secretary of State?
They are.
They are.
They are. They're in a direct line of accountability.
So the chairman is appointed by the Secretary of State to those trusts?
He's appointed by an agency of the
okay.
Secretary of State. But, you know, when I was a minister
Yeah.
and I was dealing with an ordinary NHS trust, I could just ring up the chairman and really tell them what to do. Because we had what's called a power of direction.
Right.
In the end, the Secretary of State can tell those trusts what to do.
Right. Okay, then those trusts, how then they become a foundation trust if they need to, and does it involve amalgamating of a number of hospitals?
No, it doesn't, but they have to go through a very difficult process because they have to prove that they are financially strong enough to be independent, and that is very tough at the current moment. They also have to show that they're going to get support from the local community so that they will have a strong membership.
Right.
And, you know, there are many trusts, there are 100 trusts who are not foundation trusts at the moment, and they're finding it very difficult to get foundation trust status.
Okay. NHS as a whole, trusts or foundation trusts or GPs, whatever, does it now need a healthy discussion, or does it somewhere needed that we don't have these kind of waiting lists? We're going to keep on having these problems. Who would actually fix it? It's
not broken.
No.
It's got problems.
Right.
There's a lot in our National Health Service to be proud of. I mean, we've got some fine hospitals.
Yeah.
We have very good training of doctors. We have, you know, first-rate doctors. We're one of the strongest places in the world for research. A lot of drugs are developed in the UK because of the trials that are conducted on NHS patients. But it's at great risk at the moment. It's at risk because the money coming in is not sufficient. And the government's restructuring has really disrupted a lot of the work that was being done to make the NHS as good as it could be. But there is no doubt about it that as the population gets older, demand on the health service gets higher, and yet the money come to it is getting less. And that is a very dangerous position to be in.
Is it still the issue of what it was, a lot of managers, a lot of bureaucracy going on? Is that still the case, or isn't that the, you know, where a lot of governments always come, you know, we're going to change this, change that, because of that top heavy maybe?
Well, when you think of a bureaucrat, you think of a lot of paper, don't you?
Yep.
Silly rules, and someone getting in the way of doctors and nurses doing the right thing. I don't think we have that. You do need some managers.
Absolutely,
take
yes.
my trust, £600 million. 11,000 staff, 1 million patients. You do need good managers to make sure it runs smoothly.
Yeah, yeah.
But I do think that as we go forward in the next few years, we have to think very seriously as a country about how valuable the National Health Service is to us. In 1997, we spent about 6.2% of GDP. GDP kind of represents the wealth of the country.
Yep.
So we spent about 6.2%. The average European spend was about between 8 and 9%. Countries like Germany spend 10%, and the US, 12, 14%, a massive amount. Now, in the years of the Labour government, we got that up from 6.2% to about 8.5%. The trouble is, it's declining again.
Yeah.
I believe we need to spend up to what other European countries spend. If we do that, we can have a first-rate service.
Okay. Philip, it's been great talking to you on this issue because I said a number of times we bring politicians in, we can touch on a number of subjects, but not devote the whole show where a person like you know the subject inside out, right? So when I said the NHS, for instance, next year, Labour government comes into it, or the way things are, coalition government comes in.
I can't possibly comment on that.
Of course not. Say if Labour Party win the right election, and changes inevitably will be brought in. You think the health service will be healthy then now?
I believe that if we have a Labour government next May, when the election's going to be, May 2015,
Yep.
We'll walk into the Department of Health and the brief from the civil servants will be a grim one. Because what they'll say is the health service is starved of cash, and that instead of the system that we used to have, it's got very fragmented and disjointed. And that's why you've got problems in accident and emergency departments.
Right.
But for Labour, the National Health Service will always be almost our main priority.
Absolutely.
And we're determined to put it right. There won't be a lot of money.
No.
It's pretty obvious, isn't it, that things are going to be tight. So what we've got to do is to try and cut back on inefficiencies in the system and focus on patient care and improving the way people work together, so that if you've got, probably think I'm obsessed by older people and the kind of challenges.
Well, we all got getting old.
This is life at the moment. And what we have to do is have a system which actually works to prevent people having to go into hospital in the first place, because you've got good primary care, and if someone is vulnerable, they're helped in their own home or in a care home rather than having to come into hospital. That's what we've got to start working on. We've got to make sure that people work together. The moment it's got very disjointed, different boundaries, different organisations, and the poor patient suffers as a result of that. There won't be a lot of money, extra money, so we've got to just make the system work better.
Okay. Philip, thank you very much. As I said earlier to you downstairs, Sikh Channel was launched almost 5 years ago. The anniversary is coming up in April, where we have this platform where people like you can come and address the Sikh population. There's quite a big population in the UK, and this TV goes to all of Europe and also into Canada, and shows like this are shown all over the world. Would you like to give a message or something to the Sikh people and to the Sikh Channel?
Well, I would, because it's a real privilege for me to come in to talk about the health service and say a big thank you to the Sikh community. If I think in Birmingham, the contribution the Sikh community has made to our city has been incredible. And, you know, I've visited temples, I've seen the community work, I've seen some of the schools that have been developed. And it's fantastic, and it's a real privilege to work with the community. We've done some health, I've been to Tidley, to the Sikh temple there, where we've done health programs. And we've had a lot of cooperation from the community to do it, because of course all of us are concerned about our health. So it's a great privilege to be here. I hope you'll invite me back. But I do want to say, really on behalf of, well, of the Labour Party, of the Heart of England NHS Foundation Trust, a very big thank you to the Sikh community for what you do and your contribution to society.
Philip, thank you very much, and for giving us your valuable time. And I'm sure I will be asking you again, probably near the election, and to see what's happening. And if the Sikhs out there, the Sikh temple want to invite you to ask you something, I'm sure you will be coming there. So again, thank you very much for coming, and I'm sure you'll come again. So this was Lord Hunt I was talking to about the health service, and I'm sure you'll have a number of questions, and the elections are coming up. And so you take care and involve yourself in politics and in the NHS trusts and where we can contribute more. So today, I thank Lord Hunt for coming in, and the program finishes here. किसी किस्म की गलती हो गई होवे तो जरूर माफ़ कर देना. सो अगले शो तक इजाज़त दियो. इत्थे मैनूं वधाई दी फतेह बुलाओ. वाहिगुरू जी का खालसा, वाहिगुरू जी की फतेह.